Hi, and welcome to this latest immigration law conversation video. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Elena Shutova. Elena is a registered public service interpreter and also a director at the Association of Interpreters and Translators. And we're going to talk all about interpreters in immigration cases today, because often when key actors in an immigration case, an interpreter is forgotten about and doesn't have a voice. So we're going to talk about a bit of problems and best practice today. But Elena, thank you so much for joining me. Tell us a bit about your background and what you do.
Good morning, Adam. First of all, I'm grateful for this opportunity to actually give a voice to all professional interpreters who are out there and basically living challenging situations day by day, working in tribunals and with immigration cases as well. So, me myself, I'm a lawyer, but I do have a degree in law, and also I'm a professional interpreter of Albanian language. I'm registered, and I have the level 6 diploma in public service interpreting qualification, which is a must standard for every professional interpreter in the UK. I am recently has been appointed as a director of the Association of Interpreters and Translators, but I have been their member for quite a long time. So I would like to tell a bit more about our association, because I know not many interpreters are aware of professional bodies and associations in the UK who actually can help them, can support them, and can promote their professionalism. So AIT, well, we have a very active dialogue with the Ministry of Justice, with NHS, and with national police forces. We collaborate with universities, with intermediaries, and for example, we have a training program with the Cleveland Clinic in London. As well, we engage with professional interpreters for justice organization. We gained international recognition with recent election of AIT to the board of International Federation of Translators of Europe. As well, we have ties with the European Association of Legal Interpreters and Translators, EULITA. So what we do, we offer practical support to our members. We offer professional supervision, we offer best practice hub, as well we offer help in chasing payments from the agencies. Unfortunately, this is the reality of the profession now. We have regular social events, we do fundraising, we sponsor the London Legal Walk. As well, for our associate members, we have a job referral system. So somebody who, for example, a legal professional who needs an interpreter, I cannot find one, they can become an associate member, which is free, and we can then do the job referral. And as well, we offer an unmatched frequency and a very, very busy calendar of continuous professional development. So webinars with police speakers, with lawyers, with doctors, you name it. So we do maintain and help to maintain our members the best possible professional level for their day-to-day work.
That's really helpful. I've only recently become aware of AIT and the work they do, but I think that's fantastic that registered interpreters can join you to benefit from your development program, the training, but also, so can I just get this right from you? A
Yeah.
lawyer like me or a solicitor watching this can become an associate member for free and then
Yes.
get referrals from you in terms of interpreter referrals.
Yes, or we would be very, very delighted if the associate member, for example, like yourself, or if some solicitor or probably a tribunal judge can come and do the joint training with us.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. We have a joint training with police forces, with police negotiators. It's a very unique training where we do talk about best practices, how to work with police negotiators, and how then they can work with interpreters. That's what we really would like to do, is to have a joint training with somebody who knows the in-depth process of how the legal industry functions, courts, tribunals, etc.
No, that's fantastic. So I would encourage actually immigration lawyers watching, the details are below this video, to become an associate member of the AIT in order to access these resources. And what I'll also do is put a link below this video to a webinar I'm going to do with the IIT, I think in this spring, summer time, I think around June, giving a sort of update on immigration law, practice and procedure. So whether you're an interpreter watching this, it'll be a sort of what's going on in the immigration world. And if you're an immigration practitioner, there'll be plenty of stuff for you. So do come along to those events. And I was struck by the frequency of the events. But what you talked about challenges already. What challenges do you and your members face? I know in lots of areas of law, but let's look particularly today in immigration cases, both applications and in the tribunal. What are the challenges you face as an interpreter?
So first of all, the biggest challenge is that we come across many documents and many expert reports when solicitors fail to instruct a proper interpreter. So the first no for us and first encouragement to the legal professionals is to instruct a professional interpreter. Sometimes I've heard this from solicitors, both in immigration and in criminal law, that they don't know where to find an interpreter. So what they can do, there is a national register of public service interpreters. It's free for everyone. So all you need to do is just to create an account there, and then you can browse and find yourself an interpreter whose qualifications have been checked by the register. Most of us are vetted interpreters. So somebody has just a DBS, just enhanced DBS. Some of the interpreters have a security clearance as well for work with NCA. So it's a higher level of interpreter with a good vetting. Then you can ask and browse the register of Chartered Institute of Linguists, or to visit the webpage of the Institution of Translators and Interpreters, ITI, or as well, as I said, you can become an associate member of AIT and ask us to find you an interpreter. So those interpreters are 100% professionals. So you can rely on their help. So you know that your client, especially if there's a vulnerable client, you won't miss the information because, well, we both, like me and you, Adam, we both work with law. So I'm a lawyer. I know that one word can become a crucial fact in the case. Is guilty, not guilty? Yes, no. I've been there. I haven't been there. Sometimes it's just one word which changes everything. So using an unprofessional interpreters, or especially family members, it's a no. Please, I do encourage everyone, use a professional interpreter, because professional interpreters as well, they do understand legal terminology. And trying to instruct a professional interpreter, what do you else need to do? You need to understand which dialect they speak on.
Yeah, dialects.
Yes, dialects. Dialects are very important, especially when we talk about Eastern countries, like Eastern Europe, because I work with Albanian language, and even Albania is a small country, but we have South Albanian dialect, Northern Albanian dialect, we have dialect from Kosovo, we have people from North Macedonia speaking Albanian language. These are all different dialects. So whenever you instructed a professional interpreter, make sure that they speak the same dialect. Otherwise, you won't get anything out of the session with a limited English speaker and your client. As well, instructing a professional interpreter will help you to understand that this interpreter follows the code of conduct, because we must remain neutral. We are impartial. We are just the voice. And when instructing an unprofessional interpreter or informal interpreter or family member, you will never get this neutrality. You are always in the risk of having information omitted and ending up having a witness statement which says one thing, and when it comes to tribunal, appellant says, no, I haven't said that. But it was read to you by an interpreter. No, but I don't know this interpreter, or it was my father. So it's a totally different thing. Right. There's another challenge that we face every single day, is that we usually don't get briefed. It is very, very important for interpreter to have information, well, at least basic information beforehand, especially when it comes to tribunals hearing. So, example, if you, Adam, have just received a case in the morning, what will you do? You will ask for an adjournment, would you?
No, absolutely. If you weren't properly prepared, yeah.
So the same applies to interpreter, but we cannot ask for an adjournment, can we? We don't. We are the only clueless person in the room at the point of time, because the tribunals think that it is not necessary to give us the time to talk with representatives, or at least to talk with the representative of the Home Office, so we know um, basic things about the case, issues, and the problems that they are going to resolve. Um, that's with regard of tribunals. The other challenge at the moment is that in tribunals there are different directions. So every tribunal is different and every judge is different.
Mm,
From my own practice, I had cases when the judge didn't expect me to interpret everything. So he told me, Madam Interpreter, why do you interpret the first part of the hearing? You don't need to do this. For which I said, Your Honor, not Your Honor, Judge, if this person spoke English, he would have heard what you say. So I am here to interpret everything so he knows what the representatives are talking about. Maybe there's a document missing. Maybe there's a problem which the appellant is not aware of. And then some judges ask us to summarize only, which is a no. So I do encourage all legal professionals, solicitors, and representatives who represent their clients in tribunals, please do not agree for the summaries, because we are not legally trained. There's only a handful of us who actually have a diploma in law, like myself. But most of interpreters are just interpreters. We are linguists. Of course, when we are trained, especially conference interpreters, we know how to do the summary,
mm.
but it doesn't apply for legal information. It doesn't apply for medical settings, because we're not allowed to do this, and this is forbidden by the code of conduct. We can only do this in exceptional circumstances, and I don't think that it applies to the tribunal hearing. So the tribunal hearing is not an exceptional circumstance. So when the judge thinks that it is best to do the summary, what I do, I always ask the representative to ask the judge if the judge themselves can do the summary.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful actually, because a lot of what you raise has started and my mind going in lots of different directions and lots of thoughts, because I think let's take that for a minute. There is a practice at the moment where a lot of judges will ask, oh, do you want, and they'll ask me, Mr. Pipe, do you want the submissions interpreted word for word or a summary? And sometimes I'll opt for a summary because I think, oh, it'll just the client will get confused by legal terminology, but actually your function, as you say, is just to do something, and just to be a conduit. You're not there. And actually, I'm going to flag up some cases for people. There's a case called Mohammed, Role of Interpreter, Somalia, which is 2011 UKUT 337. And that said specifically the function of a court-appointed interpreter is to interpret on behalf of the tribunal what is said at the hearing, including the appellant's evidence. It's no part of the interpreter's function to be drawn into a position where he or she has to give evidence at the hearing. Now, that was a Somali case in terms of what dialect, and you've already talked about dialects and trying to use the interpreter saying, yes, they speak this dialect as giving evidence in the case. I think you also, the differing practices in the tribunal are stark. There is a huge difference. And it's interesting, some judges criticize you for interpreting everything, where I know we've chatted offline and you brought my attention to the really helpful section on interpreters in the equal
Yeah.
treatment bench book. I'm sure you're going to come to that, but let me just it says at paragraph 99 of the equal treatment bench book, it is not good practice to tell the interpreter that an aside or something unimportant need not be translated. This can make the witness feel excluded or even distrustful. So there's some
Yes.
really good stuff in the equal treatment bench book there. And that's just the equal treatment bench book deals with things like vulnerability. What are the particular challenges and issues you find with vulnerable clients?
So when working with vulnerable clients, yes, the biggest challenge is the trauma response that they have when they relieve their history, their account, when giving the witness statement or explaining what has happened in the tribunal. So, um, first of all, when the solicitor instructing an interpreter to work with a vulnerable client, they have to make sure that there is no conflict of interest, and I will explain you why. Because for example, in my case, what I work with Albanian language, Albanian community is very small, and Eastern European countries, like they do have to have, they do tend to have a very tight community,
Mm.
and they have very strong ties with back home. So, so this has to make sure by talking to an interpreter, by explaining them what the case is about and which part of, for example, Albania the person is from, make sure that there is no possible conflict of interest. So the interpreter won't be drawn into the situation where he or she can become a witness, or the person will feel very uncomfortable by knowing that, for example, I've been myself in this situation. I went to assist for a lady, a particularly vulnerable client, and we end up being from the same part. So I lived in the same part of Albania as she is, so we knew same people. So I had to withdraw from the case. This is very, very, very important. Tribunals don't do this, but solicitor, when they have this ability, they have to make sure, first of all, there's no conflict of interest. Second, they have to make sure that they instructed interpreter and explain the possible trauma triggers, because we all are people. Despite the fact that we are impartial, some of us can be triggered by trauma as well, and then we can relieve the the account that has been told to us or through us, and it called the oh, sorry, I forgot.
No, actually, well,
Yes,
vicarious trauma is a big issue, certainly, and
yes,
causing
vicarious
people,
trauma.
but also there's that issue of people when they recount. I've had a lot of experts, medical experts, say when a client gives evidence about trauma, they're re-experiencing that trauma
Yes,
through giving evidence, and that's something absolutely.
yes. There's one thing else. So some of the clients, they do have a good command of English language, but what I would suggest is the interpreter is always necessary in taking their account, in writing down the witness statement or preparing for the interview. Because when somebody talks about their traumatic experience, they experience a very high level of anxiety, which blocks the cognitive ability to use an English language. So they won't be able to give you a full account. So it is very important to have a properly trained and professional interpreter by your side, so your client can give you the full account. Because,
I
as I
think
said, one word matters.
I think that's so important. Uh, One of the things I've tried to emphasize, and I'll put the link below this video, is the changes brought about by the new tribunal practice direction. And again, that emphasizes the importance of witness statements, including the correct interpreter attestation at 8.12 of the practice direction. So make sure if you're drafting witness statements, the correct interpreter attestation is there. But given the witness statement is so important in a case, having taking time with vulnerable clients through a professional interpreter to make sure that story is properly articulated, especially when there is not now the opportunity in court to ask questions in chief. Judges want to move straight to cross-examination. So I think that's so important. And also flagging up, I think you raised something important. It's a lawyer's duty to make sure. Now, this should be done in the pre-hearing stage through my HMCTS, through the skeleton argument, but also should be reiterated on the day of the hearing, is flagging up those vulnerabilities. If people have that issue with talking about traumatic events. I've had to recently do it a lot with, and in the Albanian context, women who've been trafficked from sexual servitude, and there's that issue that they'll be re-traumatized through going through that. So raising those vulnerabilities with the tribunal to make sure the questioning is done appropriately, certainly. And I think what you raise is so important about that somebody from the same community as you may not want to disclose their account in front of
Yes.
you because of issues of shame. I think that's so important. Give us some let's look at some positive stuff. Let's talk about some best practice stuff. What would help you? I've touched upon. I already
Yeah.
flagged up the equal treatment bench book. If there's anything else you want to point our attention to, what are some things
Um,
that would help you most? Just one thing I wanted to pick up before we do that is in the tribunal. Obviously, there's difficulties and representatives need to be careful about talking to interpreters before the hearing so the judge doesn't think you're sort of interfering with the interpreter. Although what I tend to do is when I'm in court, I might say to the interpreter, oh, this is a marriage case. The issue in this case is insurmountable obstacles, or this is an asylum case. It's just about this, just to flag up in the interpreter's mind that this is what the issues are. It is the judge's role to make sure the interpreter is understood. And can I just I think you flagged up already. There's often blame put in on interpreters, and clients will try and blame interpreters for discrepancies in their statements, and then lawyers will try and blame interpreters when appealing. There's a case that people should be aware of. That's called TS brackets interpreters. It's an Eritrean case, 2019 UKUT 352. That's TS interpreters. And that says the tribunal will be slow to overturn a judge's decision on the basis of alleged errors or problems with interpreting. But it talks about the assessment that the judge should undertake to make sure there are no problems at the start of the hearing and how to deal with problems if they arise. So have a look at that case. But let's get on to some positive best practice stuff, Elena.
just a quick comment on that. So you can always use a professional interpreter. So using a professional interpreter, a registered and accredited public service interpreter, it always minimizes the risk of having information being changed.
Yeah.
And having going into the appeal to the upper tribunal and high court just because there probably was alleged mistake in interpreting or translation. So yeah, please do use professional interpreters. And with regards of the judges thinking that we might be involved in the case, we have a professional duty for confidentiality. So we are there. I understand they think that we might talk to appellants, but we never do. We can talk to the professional, to the representative, maybe with yourself, but there's always a representative of the Home Office. Or we don't have any interest with the representative of the Home Office. So they can always just give us a small summary, quick summary of the case. So we can tune ourselves in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's helpful.
Because there's some cases you can talk about the human trafficking, and the next thing you know, you have a victim of the war conflict. Two different scopes of terminology, and you have to tune yourself in. It's just just quick instructions. So with regards of the best practice, when we chatted, I already told you that the perfect day of life an interpreter would be if every man would follow the bench book on the equality, particularly the chapter with regards of interpreters. And the one before this one is when the judge is addressing or dealing with the cases with people for whom English is not the first language. So I would suggest everyone read that one as well, because some interpreters, despite the fact that we are professionals, English is not our first language. Sometimes it's actually really helpful is if people will start talking slowly, especially Home Office representatives. So yeah, best practices: hire a professional interpreter. Make sure that they do understand your client. Brief your interpreter.
Yeah.
Explain them what this case is about in summary, because we don't need to go into details. The cases are huge, so we can't know all the details, but at least we have to know the problems, the issues. Make sure that you explain to your interpreter that if they see or feel that there's a certain cultural difference, they have to flag this cultural difference to you. There's one small example in Albania. Some people use old money, some people use new money. So £100 can turn into 1,000 because somebody will say, yeah, it's old money. And a lot of other cultural differences. So a professional interpreter will usually do this, but you have to explain this to your interpreter before. What else?
No, those are really helpful things. Can I ask you, Just one question that came up is we're talking now on Zoom. Uh,
Yeah.
we've we've had no communication difficulties, but often these days, especially when there's late bookings of interpreters, interpreters will come into the tribunal on the CVP link.
Yeah.
Do you find any particular challenges when doing online? That, and let's say myself, the judge, the Home Office, and the client are in court, and you're there on video, which often will happen. Are there any particular challenges there for you? Anything
Uh,
we could do to help get the best out of the interpreters and ensure the best sort of experience for clients there?
please use the microphones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We the biggest challenge at the moment is the technical problems, the
Mm.
equipment, and the quality of connection
Yeah.
at the tribunals, because sometimes we do not hear at all. So I've been assisting with one case as a tribunal interpreter where there were no microphones working. So the only working microphone was the judge's microphone, and they had to kind of share this microphone, move it around to the appellant so I could actually hear what he was saying. That is the biggest challenge, because when you are um, remotely and you cannot hear properly, you can always make a mistake, because well, there's just a difference in one letter
Yeah.
give you one word. There was this case in Snaresborough Crown Court when the interpreter said, I think it was beaten and bitten. So somebody got bitten up or was bitten by a dog. I don't really know the details of the case, but I've heard about it. So one letter can change everything. Can change the word, and then the word becomes a fact.
It's so true. Last a week ago today, I was doing a case involving somebody's wife who has medical illnesses. She's living in Pakistan. The client was asked, "Are you satisfied with the treatment she's getting there?" And the answer was yes. When I came out of court, the friend who actually is an interpreter himself said to me, "Oh, the answer was no, I was not satisfied." But the interpreter completely turned it round, and like fortunately we succeeded in that case, and that issue didn't make a difference. But what you say is so right, that little things can make a huge difference. And I think if there's two things that have come away from what you've said today is the importance of using a professional interpreter is correct. And I think I often see it. I encourage clients to, as I said to you earlier, to get expert reports. They shell out a lot of money, but then they use a family member to interpret for the social worker. So then the Home Office says to the judge, how can we trust what's said in this? Because what was being said was being relayed through a family member who's got a vested interest. So, yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's so important. And the second thing is, I think hopefully what we've said today makes people also think from the interpreter's perspective. Perhaps, I'm guilty as much as anybody else. When we're dealing with cases, are we just taking on board the interest of the interpreter to make sure, and ultimately it serves your client, and your client gets the best because the interpreter is well served. Elena, is there anything else you wanna leave us with? Sorry, I've talked a lot, but anything else before we finish up?
well, I can talk hours about this, but
Absolutely.
at this point of time, I think I've covered everything that I wanted. But yeah, just please brief your interpreter. Use a professional interpreter and brief your interpreter. And when you are in tribunal, especially with vulnerable client, please make sure that this summary of what has been said has been done by the judge and not by the interpreter, because we are not allowed to cherry pick information, and we are not legally trained to do that. I know some judges, they are quite shocked by this information. I've been there
Mm.
literally not yesterday, day before yesterday. I've been in the same situation when Judge called me an unprofessional just because other interpreters were okay with doing summary of hour-long submissions and putting them into writing in 3 different sentences. We are not allowed to do that. We are not there to do this. We are there to be a voice and ears of your client.
Do you know, it's something that I need to go away and think more about, because I think you raised something important there. By asking an interpreter to summarize, you're putting an interpreter beyond just a conduit of information. They're then having to select what information they translate, and that's a real challenge. Can I just give people some resources to go away with? Elena and I have talked about the Equal Treatment Bench book, and I've talked about the practice direction. All the links will be below the video. But at 13.1 of the practice direction for the tribunal, it says the tribunal must have regard to the latest version of the Equal Treatment book. So actually, the tribunal practice direction says that regard must be had. I'll put a link to the Equal Treatment book. Elena talked about the section before the one on interpreters, and that's communication with speakers of English as a second or third language. And that starts at paragraph 68 of the Equal Treatment book. And I wanted to read the section then that follows is the section on interpreters. And I just wanted to close by reading this paragraph from the Equal Treatment book. And then, Elena, I'll come back to you to tell us how people can reach out to you and the association to find out more. Paragraph 88 says this: an interpreter has a difficult job. Languages do not interpret in ways which identically match each other. They can differ in grammatical structure, vocabulary, the meaning of certain abstract concepts, and in how much is directly spoken as opposed to understood between the lines. The interpreter's job is to transfer as near as possible the meaning of what is said by each side, not merely to translate words and phrases literally, which can create a false impression. So loads of brilliant information in the Equal Treatment book. I'd encourage representatives, especially those dealing with vulnerable clients, to mine into that, because it now has to be taken into account in immigration cases. I'll also link the cases we've talked about. But Elena, in terms of reaching out to you for anybody who wants to connect with you, or the association in terms of membership as an interpreter, and I've encouraged actually the association and interpreters to get along to those court user meetings at the tribunals. They're open to you. Don't think they're only open to lawyers, so you can get your voice heard as well, and people can also hear from you and the what the needs of interpreters are. But how do people connect with you guys?
So we do have social media accounts at the moment. So it's LinkedIn, Facebook. You can always reach us there. So there's an email account, info@aitprofessionals.com. So you can either message us on the social media or send us an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And we tend to reply like within minutes because we really are there to support professionals and support our members, to provide the best possible service for limited English speakers and their clients.
No, that's really helpful. And you don't have to be a member to come to the training events as well. You can sign
No,
up. Links
yeah,
on Eventbrite. So I hope to see people at the event I'm doing with AIT later in the year. But there's a ton of other events. So look on Eventbrite as well, where all the events are listed, and you can claim CPD. And whether you're an interpreter or a lawyer, it'll be mutually beneficial. So Elena, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for the time you've spent and what you've shared. Really appreciate it.
thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.